Today's topic would be this making Chennai the future city, and it is a real pleasure to share this stage with academicians, researchers, and people we generally see on the ground when it comes to any kind of issue. So to begin with, Mridula, you know Chennai very well, and this city has gone through its ups and downs, and on one side we see it expanding vastly, and people are enjoying that vast expansion, that development. But on the other side, we are also seeing that negative effect of such expansion, especially during the rainy season. So it's like that particular season which gives a kind of sense the people into a panic mode. You are, like, I know you're humble, but you are an expert in climate change. So your view on it.
Thank you, Madhav. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, India Today. It's a pleasure to be here with such illustrious co-panelists. Let me give an example. I think if you go to a different country and you see an animal for the first time, you'll try to see what characteristics it has. So if we were to think of India's water as that animal, it has certain characteristics. One thing that we've forgotten about our own water is that it's one of the most seasonal in the world. Right? I actually learned that most of India's rainfall falls within 100 hours. If you look at the number of days on which it rains in Chennai, it's about 40 to 50 days, whereas in Western countries, it's well above 100. So, but we use water every day. So when we get water only during certain times of the year, but we use water every day, what do you need to match demand and supply? You need storage. Okay, and our ancestors actually built that with the Aries and the Kurams and the Kanmais and all of that. But as we expanded, what did we do? They became very convenient pieces of land to build over. So we filled them up and we built them over. So I think, so when it rains, there's nowhere for the rain to flow into. And conversely, when the area is there, it recharges the groundwater. So when you filled it up, there's you experience the contrast. And you mentioned climate change, so I'll end with that. Now, all of you have a smartphone in front of you. So take a photograph on it, and you know the contrast dial. Push the contrast dial all the way to one side. That's exactly what climate change does to your water. So if there is seasonality, it increases seasonality. So it makes wet days wetter, it makes wet regions wetter, it makes dry regions drier. It makes wet seasons wetter, it makes dry regions drier. So without the storage, it's exposing you more. Hope I have answered that.
That's right. And Tirupurkar sir, this question is specifically about the infrastructure development when it comes to the state. Is it a main reason for the destruction Chennai faces every rain season? Because like Mridula said, it seems like we are not concentrating on saving water bodies, be it like artificially constructed or the natural ones. Is there any kind of solution Chennai could have for this issue?
See, that is not conserving or preserving water bodies is one of the reasons. For mitigation of flood risk or any other disaster risk, first of all, we have to understand the risk. Understand not only the risk that has been exposed, but underlying risk. What is the risk that has not been exposed? And also we have to understand not only the current risk, but how this risk is going to change in future. So you need to have good risk assessments, a complete hazard, risk, vulnerability and capacity assessment of Chennai city. That is very essential. The second is improving disaster risk governance. That is important. Governance in terms of institutions, in terms of empowering them, in terms of delegation of powers, in terms of techno-legal regime, in terms of networking, all these are very, very important. The third priority would be investing in risk reduction. This is a very beautiful word. We are not saying spending for disaster risk reduction. It is actually an investment. Many studies say if you spend 1 rupee on disaster risk reduction or mitigation today, you will be saving about 7 to 8 rupees in terms of search and rescue, relief and post-disaster reconstruction. So we have to invest in risk reduction. Particularly, we have to focus on critical infrastructure like hospitals, roads, communication. All these are very, very important. Power sector, we have to focus on all these things. And finally, whatever you do, risk will not become zero. There will be some residual risk, and you have to be better prepared for facing the risk. You need better early warning systems, better preparedness, and if at all there is a disaster, then we have to build post-disaster reconstruction should be in such a way that we build it better than what it was. We say it has to be in contrast to building back similar. These are the things, in my opinion, one has to undertake.
Well, sir, in your view, for the 2015 floods that Chennai saw, what could have been the reason? Because there were like we listened to academicians or people here, there was a different version. From the government, it was an entirely different version, and from people who actually followed the climate pattern, there was a different version. So on one side, we had the infrastructure. There were like plans after plans for infrastructure development, especially disaster management. Even after that, Chennai faced a large deluge. What was the reason behind it? This is something every Chennaiite would like to know.
See, the reason for 2000 floods is little different from 2021 floods. All of us know it. But if you ask different stakeholders, it will be like a Rashomon movie only. Each of them will be giving their own version. But the truth will be in between all these things. So one of the main reasons for 2015, as many academic studies say, is poor reservoir management. That is what they say. And in addition to that, if the city is not able to hold that water, if the drains are not able to discharge that, again flooding will be definitely there.
And you actually mentioned about the need for power. And Nityanand, you're actually spearheading a movement where it is involving the Ennore power plant, which is supposed to also provide power to the city. And there seems to be an issue looming. And you have been cautioning people about how it can actually cause issues to the city. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Thank you. So the Ennore wetlands are probably the largest wetlands in Chennai. So stretching all the way from Manali, which used to be a marshland, and then we sacrificed the marshland because we felt that a petrochemical or a petroleum refinery is more important than a marshland. Then we sacrificed the remaining Ennore wetlands because we felt that electricity generation is very important. And now we are sacrificing the Kattupalli Island, which is a sand dune studded island, which protects the inland areas from salinity intrusion, from cyclonic winds, and we have done that in the name of Make in India or whatever else. So there are 3 major ports on the island. The ports then erode the northern coast, which invites the sea further inland. That island is a very narrow island. If it's breached, then we will have sea view apartments in Gumadipundi. So this is the threat that you have at the Bay of Bengal, and the lagoon, Pulicat Lagoon, can merge because of something that we call development. So what is the critique of development? Is growth really sustainable? Is it possible to continue to grow? Growth is a biological concept. Things are born, they grow, and they die. But here we have this myth of never-ending, growth. And the second thing that is very important is we keep talking about the disasters as if they affect everybody equally. They don't. Development exacts a price from people from certain communities, people from certain classes. So if you look at North Chennai, it is an area that has historically oppressed communities in a disproportionate number of them living there, working class communities. And that is the area where we have chosen to locate a 10 million ton petroleum refinery, 3,300 megawatts of coal-fired power, coal yards, 3 ports, and the garbage dump. So I'm saying that, yes, all these things need to be done, but if we do not figure out a way to address issues of inequity and injustice, all these technical solutions will eventually fail. And there is not just me, but also the Intergovernmental Platform for the Climate Change that has just now said that without addressing issues of equity and justice, any risk reduction measures and adaptation measures will end up being maladaptation, because it will just mean that you're shifting the problem from one community, which is usually the elite dominant community, to communities down the pecking order.
So, Jayaram, you know the city's plan on the back of your head, and I can vouch for it. So how strong is the infrastructure of Chennai when it comes to expansion or handling a disaster?
Right. I think we have the best infrastructure in terms of the water resources that we have. I mean, if you compare it with any other state, any other city, for example, I don't know whether it will be like that. Right? In Chennai, we have Professor Janagraj is here. He always used to say, there is Kosastalayar in the north, Kuvam in the middle, Adayar in the south, Buckingham Canal cutting across this. There are 3,000 water bodies in Chennai, Kanjipuram, and Tiruvallur. There are 16 major canals. There are so with all this, we still have floods, we still have water crisis. Every other alternative, right? So I think I would say that there is a very strong lack of political will that is there. If we need political will to change this, even after 2015, I'll just give you a couple of examples. After 2015, we went to the Vilivakkam Lake. Vilivakkam Lake has shrunk from 214 acres to 39 acres. Now, we don't know whether we can recover the entire 214 acres. That's almost impossible. It has happened over several decades. But we can at least save this 39 acres. Water did not flow into the Vilivakkam Lake during the 2015 floods, primarily because all the metro rail earth was dumped inside the Vilivakkam Lake. 20 acres was dumped. Now, we bring this out, we move the code, we get an order for restoration of the lake, and now the lake is being restored. And out of 39 acres, the government is creating a water spread area of 15 acres. And in the rest of the land, they want to build amusement park. They want to build sewage treatment plant inside the water body, right? So we have not learnt our lesson even after the 2015 deluge. We are missing a very key point. Today, smart cities and all these things are about beautification for many of the government officials, many of the politicians. We need to understand it's about creating the necessary infrastructure. A water body is a live water body only when there is an inlet, only when there is an outlet, right? So, I mean, there are several examples that I can give you. You take the Semanjeri case in Soringanallur Lake. A citizen came to us in 2019. He told us, sir, ஏதாவது ஏரியை ஆக்கிரமிச்சாங்கன்னா போலீஸ் ஸ்டேஷன் போகலாம் போலீஸ் ஸ்டேஷனே ஏரி ஆக்கிரமிச்சா எங்கே போகிறது so and they feared so for those who don't understand Tamil a citizen said I mean if someone encroaches on a lake we can go to the police station but if the police station encroaches their lake where will we go right so the issue there was the citizens were afraid to file a complaint so we filed a complaint on it and I got an FIR on it right so till today we are struggling when the current ruling party when they were in opposition they supported it they said this is an encroachment how can a police station be built on a lake today they are going to court and saying in court they are saying that this is not a lake at all 150 acres of water body that you can see in Google satellite imagery you can take revenue records you can take everything now they are declaring that this entire thing is not a water body right so therefore we are it requires a very strong political will. We are not saying that you have to restore all the lands that was encroached 50 years back, but you need to have some kind of a timeline. You have to say, okay, at least 2015. After 2015, you won't allow. CMDA still till today they are allowing reclassification of the land. Reclassification of water body has been termed illegal. The state does not have the power to alienate a water body for some other purposes. And it has been declared as illegal. Supreme Court has said it, High Court has said it, several others have said it. CMDA has at least taken up 20 proposals after 2015. They have reclassified 11 lands after 2015. The rest 9 is because of objections from people like us. Right? So, therefore, there are several, Pallikarnai marshland, it's the, we don't need to tell about marshland. But in marshland, can you imagine 1,000 acres of registration has happened over the last 20 years? 1,000 acres of registration. We have to declare, this is after declaring it as an, ecological spot, after declaring it as saying that, it has been handed over to the forest department. After this, the registration is happening. So, this political will come from transparency and accountability. If this transparency and accountability is not there, see today, none of these officials who have taken this, who have registered the marshland, who have changed. We are talking about not just encroachments by the poor, encroachments of houses. We are talking about legalized encroachments, where the land classification has been changed over time. It has been changed. So several, from high courts to several other places have been built on water bodies. We know Madurai high courts to several other places people say are built on water bodies. So therefore, we need to understand, we need to take a call, at least now. There needs to be transparency on, we have been asking for, put down all the survey numbers of the water bodies that are there for the public to see.
Is it difficult?
I mean, in digital India, it should be simple, no? But unfortunately, so far, we have not seen anything, right? So these, see, unless you have this transparency, unless there is a political will to take action on those, a person registering 66 acres of marshland in Rayapuram sub-registrar office. Pallikarnai's marshland has been registered in Rayapuram sub-registrar office. Now this official is the head of the intelligence who has to find out the fraud for the entire Tamil Nadu in the registration department. What can we do? So, we need transparency, we need accountability, and we need that political will. Unless that happens, things are not going to change, is what we think.
Like what we are discussing currently are immediate battles, but here I would like to get Mridula's opinion on one important aspect, which is a long term. Is Chennai ready to face a climate change in the next 100 years?
See, I think in the last 3 years, we've gone to climate change will affect the future to climate change. Climate has already changed. Okay, so I think you're seeing it, and what is relatively we are more confident about is that events such as 2015, 2019, last December will become more common. I think that's a very robust finding. But you ask me, are we ready? I'll just flip that question around. You know, you said that once upon a time, not so long ago, I mean, earlier in the 20th century, all these lakes and all were there. And what we found out, we said, look, we don't know, so let's go and check it. We actually studied Madurai. Okay, for the Chennai people, it's a city that's a little south of you. So we studied Madurai and we went and asked, we started understanding what makes an area a secure area, what makes it functional. And we found a number of factors, but the most important factor was the link between the area and its surrounding community. That becomes very important because even if it's a small koram, if the community cared about it, it remained relatively secure even if it was in a very urbanized area. But the moment it became an orphan area where the community didn't connect with it, we found it was a question mark. And then we asked, okay, what makes an area secure? What makes it connect with the community? So we went to the past. We looked at historical documents. There were several things. One was, of course, the water that irrigation areas gave, that gave livelihood. Second was status in Mudal Maryadai and all those things that came. But we also found that areas were very important sources of cash flow, of jobs, fishing. You know, one fisherman told us, 11 variety மீன் இருக்குமா அது தண்ணி ஏற இறங்க வந்து அந்த மீன் வெவ்வேறு different types. There were 11 varieties of fish which worked with the water changes. But in the last 30 years, we've gone for the 3-carp culture. And a lot of the fishing that goes on in the areas has stopped. I won't name the lake. There's a rejuvenation of a Chennai lake in which I'm on the committee. The water is so polluted apparently that the fishermen... Huh? No, I won't name it. The fishermen have a gentleman's agreement not to sell the fish in the surrounding community. It's so polluted. So fishing has stopped. Lotuses have stopped. Livestock has stopped. So if you go to a person living next to an area in Chennai or in Madurai or whatever, and the area kittendi enakku enna varudhu, right? The services that the lake provides, which is recharging your groundwater, people don't understand. Saving you from intense rainfall, people don't understand because it's invisible. All of you have a bottle of water. We also have it. How many of you work towards getting that water into your bottle and into your tables? That has become invisible. So you take it for granted. So the services provided by the area have become invisible and taken for granted. Right? So that is the biggest thing. The link between the community, either status, either cash flow, or the water services have become invisible. You flip it around, you make it visible, and I can assure you, I agree with you that, you know, many of the Indian cities have not the best, but we have infrastructure that can make us climate proof. Because we think the climate is only changing now. It has changed several times in the past before. So it will protect us, and we can protect ourselves, but that link between community and area has to grow stronger. I think that's an important start. Thanks.
So, Tirupukar sir, you visited Tamil Nadu during 2015 floods, and you visited Nepal during the earthquake. You have vast knowledge about disaster management. Is Chennai, what is the present condition? Because like anytime it rains for 2 hours, it's this much deep water, and we have to go stand there and show it to the general public. So is there any kind of solution to this immediate effect? Because on one side, Chennai needs to become a future city, and this is definitely going to hold it back.
See, we have to do two things. One is we should stop accumulating new risks. From today, let us say, we should not accumulate any risk. The second is mitigate the existing risk. For mitigating the existing risk, as I said earlier, you should have a complete asset risk vulnerability assessment. Risk also follows almost Pareto's principle, 80-20. 80% of the risk is concentrated in 20% of the places. If you can rightly identify those 20% of the places which have maximum risk and attend to them on priority basis, risk will be reduced. As said, I said here earlier by other panelists, that preserving water bodies is absolutely essential. In addition to that, creating new storage capacity in the upstream, the upper catchment areas is absolutely essential. Three important things we have to take care of. One is reduce runoff. All the rain should not run on the road. That is the number one. So create water storage capacity. Rainwater harvesting, many other steps can be done. The second is stagger runoff. Don't let all the water run into the drains at the same time. So you have to create temporary holding ponds, retention structures. Many countries have done many innovative things in this. Like Japan has constructed a huge underground storage tank. Malaysia, they have converted a tunnel of 9.5 kilometers into a temporary storage tank during rain for preventing floods. So many innovative things can be done. And Japan has done by converting playgrounds, open spaces, and stadiums also into temporary storage structures. And then once the water subsides, then you release it into the drains. That can be done. The third thing is ensure that the water flows properly in the drains and reaches the sea, which means proper desilting has to be done on frequent basis. And we can also redesign our drainage structures. Normally we do it a flat-bottomed one. What happens is flat-bottomed ones are designed for peak flow. During normal times, silt accumulation will start. You should redesign it in such a way that you can have a parabolic or a circular one at the bottom. So the siltation, the velocity will increase, siltation will not take place if the peak flow is not there. So many other things. Techno-legal regime has to be taken care of. We should not allow constructions on the floodplains, and we should take care of the buffer zones. If it is inevitable that some construction has to be there, then it should be built on stilts only, so that the water flows, water is not obstructed. And what we have to understand is, this is not only pertaining to Chennai, this is the way urbanization has taken place throughout India and throughout the world. So flood is not new to Chennai. If you look at from 2000 we had flood in Hyderabad, 2001 in Ahmedabad, 2002 and 3 in Delhi, 2004 Chennai, 2005 Mumbai, 2006 Surat. I can go on listing till 2020. Every year one city or the other has been affected, because that is the way urbanization has taken place. See, what happens is, before urbanization, from one water body to another water body, water will flow. Need not necessarily through drains. On lands, private lands and patta lands, water will flow and will reach the water body at the lower level. When urbanization takes place, construction comes there and water flow is not allowed. What we should have done, or what we should do in future is that drainage facility should be there to ensure that water flows from one water body. That is how land use planning has to be done. Proper land use planning is absolutely necessary. If we can, and as rightly said by one of the panelists, community-based disaster management, ownership of the community is absolutely essential. They should be involved not as a beneficiary, right from the beginning, planning, implementing, and owning and maintaining. In all these stages, they have to be involved so that they will take care of the water bodies. And we only think of building the capacity of the people who are implementing projects. And I would say that we should also build the capacity of the recipients. If you are building a water body, if you are building a structure, ensure that the recipients, the community's capacity is also built to maintain it. We have to also look at blue-green infrastructure, blue-green solutions, not only gray solutions. It's time we think of reducing structural measures and focus on much more non-structural measures. That's what I would say.
Nityanand, do you believe like to make the city future-proof, or is there a possibility for the city to expand in any way? Because on the north, we have the Eno Creek, which is undergoing a lot of issues currently, and on the south, we could see a vast expansion. But is the city built to handle this kind of expansion? Because on the other side, we have like expansion of dump yards as well. It's almost like related to each other. So is it possible?
So I think that, what Tripugar sir said is very important, that you should not accumulate risks. You must not aggravate an already bad situation. Chennai's urbanization history has come at the cost of open lands, wetlands, and this does not just block water and create waterlogging and inundation. It also disrupts the connection between the sky and the earth, which means that water cannot percolate into the ground. The groundwater reservoirs are far greater in capacity than your surface water bodies. And I think that this, what we call expansion or growth, or what we, go around inviting investments for, is definitely, to put it mildly, it's a double-edged sword. In my mind, it is a disaster. It's a recipe for disaster. Chennai has already grown well beyond its limits. And how is that limit set? If you take the rivers of Kuam or Adayar or Kosasthalayar, they have a discharge capacity. And that discharge capacity is, probably calculated on a 1 in 100 year flood or rains. That is pretty much a hard limit. You can move it a little bit above. So you can't have a larger discharge from the Adayar River. When you have more water coming into the Adayar than its ability to discharge, then water logs and stays somewhere else. When you build, when you develop, when you grow the city, you're also putting in place more hard surfaces on the earth. So for instance, Chennai's built-up area was about 47 square kilometers in 1980. It is now 402 square kilometers. So within the same 1,200 square kilometer Chennai city, you've had nearly an 8-fold increase in built-up area. What that does is, of course, the water logging, but it also generates more runoff. So water that could have gone down, could have soaked, could have been slowed down by vegetation, has now been converted into runoff by the concrete surfaces, overwhelming our little drains and the macro drains, and the big drains like the natural drains. So that, I think, is your hard limit. We have exceeded that, is what I believe, which means that the people in the city will need to learn how to live with floods. That's an adaptation. We already saw a very beautiful example of it, of people bringing their cars on top of Velachery flyover. That's a adaptation by the people. And but I think that there's a lot more that can be done to make things better, provided you don't aggravate the risks. But what we are doing now, and I think Jayaram has spoken about it, in Ennur we are seeing it, there is a seamless continuity between governments. No matter how opposed they are to each other's ideology, there is a seamless continuity in devaluing open, unbuilt spaces. Infrastructure has come to mean concrete, and a solution has to be a concrete solution in order to be a solution. As a result, I think that what I find in my last 30 years of activism, I've been working with more solution-impacted communities than problem-impacted communities. There are more people who have been affected by the rich man's solution of a desalination plant, or of a thermal power plant, or of where the infrastructures, the hard infrastructures like highways. So if you look at what's been done, the Madras Harbour is an excellent example. That harbour was required for Madras's development, not for the well-being of the people in Blacktown. That is required for the white man to take money back to England. And that harbour built the Marina Beach, because on the southern side, the sand was blocked. And we had a nice expanse of Marina Beach, and Chennai has lost nearly 1,000 acres in the north. And that does not matter, because they're only fishing communities and Dalit communities who are living in that area. That real estate does not matter. So at the bottom of it, I think that the issue of discrimination stands out, that we are still a very racist kind of a society, and that needs to be addressed. So I think that and the fact that you need to look at the limits to growth. Nature tells you what are the limits, and you would need to figure out whether you want to do that. Otherwise, you'd have to live with the consequences. And unfortunately, the consequences fall heavier on certain communities that are not necessarily the ones who have caused the problem.
So, Jayaraman, earlier you criticized the smart city plan. So many experts here have given out like various ways, solutions to actually handle the current situation and could help in making Chennai the future city. Does the smart city plan, according to you, have any of the solutions in it, incorporated in it, or are you still going to criticize it?
No, not right now. Definitely not right now. It's part of the smart city plans that are there. Right now, the part of the smart city plan has been largely to, as I said, it's about beautification. It's about even for a water body. It's not about marking the boundary. It's not about restoring to its as much as capacity as possible. That's not the current mode in which the smart cities work. But of course, we would like the smart cities to change course and do things. And one of the things I think that we left out in this whole thing is about the solid waste management. That also affects this, creates the flooding, affects a lot of things that we are doing. For example, Chennai spent almost budgeted 6,000 crores just a couple of years back for solid waste management. But when we looked at the tender, we saw it was for solid waste displacement. It was not for solid waste management, right? Because the solid waste rules very clearly say that you need to ensure that composting needs to be done. You need to recycle it, and then you have to take a very minimum percentage to the landfill. But today we are dumping everything into the Palikarnai marshland, Kodingiyur space, and many other places. So therefore, this is another key problem that we are facing, for which, of course, there needs to be political will.
They also said about biomining, using that and such.
Right. See, but again, many of these things that comes about are centralized solutions, right? So that is also a very key problem. Today, you see battery vehicles all over the road. So the battery vehicles have 3 bins. So they are supposed to collect it separately from people, but then they dump it together into a lorry and take it to the Palikarnai marshland and dump there, right? So this is the kind of displacement that we are seeing, number one. Number two, even with respect to the flood, floods can happen, but it's also about how quickly we are able to bounce back from the flood and other things that we are seeing. So therefore, for that, we need to ensure that our water bodies are restored to its as much full capacity as possible. We need to ensure that solid waste management is there. We need to ensure, as he said, the desalination plant. What we are doing, we are mixing, clear water with sewage, letting it to the water body, taking it to the sea, and then you build a desalination plant to clean it. Why do you do that, right, in the first place? Right? So these are important issues that we need to look at, and a smart city will be really a city which will look at these infrastructure issues, address it at the first point itself, to make sure that these are not rocket science, these are simple science where we can restore our water bodies, take care of our water bodies, take care of our solid waste management, take care of our other kinds of restoration works that we need to do. So if we are able to do that, I think then we will be able to change course. But right now, we are not seeing any change.
No, if I can add, I couldn't agree with you more. I think solid waste is like really Brahmastra in our back pocket. And I think the way to, and just before this, I was a jury member for startups that are making both for-profit and not-for-profit startups that are making value out of solid waste. I mean, there are literally hundreds of thousands of jobs you can create if you actually see the waste not as waste but as a resource. Unfortunately, the most of the management of solid waste in India today is being done by waste pickers in very inhumane conditions. But the small pieces of hope is there are literally tens, 20s, hundreds of people coming and changing that. And I think that seeing it differently. You can't change the problem if you see it as waste and, it's not my problem. The moment you say it's my problem, I am a part of the solution, and you see it as a resource, I think you can really change it. Really great point on this already.
Uh, Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us and like brilliant points, especially brilliant solutions. Like every year we are facing it, and currently we've got a lot of solutions over here. And hope the lawmakers and those who write the drafts for the smart city also have listened to these solutions over here. I once again thank the panelists. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Whenever a major catastrophe happens or a disaster happens, all the disaster management planning and prevention mitigation is centered around or focused on that particular disaster, the most recent disaster. It should not be like that. Chennai is a multi-hazard prone city. Other hazards should also be taken into account. We should not exclusively focus on floods. It should not be flood-centric disaster management. That's what I would say.
Right, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you to our panelists for your valuable thoughts here.